Welcome to the Registered Report. My name is John Buckley. I'm the Register of Deeds of Plymouth County. This show is about Plymouth County real estate. Our headline for the month was Slow Trends in Real Estate Continue. We're reporting on the September numbers here for the October show, taped here at Brockton Cable Access. It's my 144th show. So let's talk about deeds. Deeds of sales of property. So we had 820 deeds for the month of September, less than the 875 in August, 22% less than the 153 deeds last year recorded in September. In year-to-date, we're down 19%. You're going to see a chart of sales across the 27 communities of Plymouth County, from Abington to Whitman. Plymouth and Brockton have the most activity in the county, but every community has had sales activity. The biggest drop we've seen during the slower real estate market has been in mortgages. Once the rates went up, refinancing stopped, and there are people still doing mortgages for the purchase of properties, but that brings the numbers down. There were 1,512 mortgages recorded in September, less than the 1,617 in August, down 52% compared to 3,020 mortgages in September 21. In year-to-date, we're down 45%. That is something we expect to continue in the current real estate climate. The real estate foreclosure issues we've followed very closely since the meltdown in 2008. And because of the foreclosure moratorium during COVID, those numbers on the foreclosure deeds have not gone up that much. But all that you need to do is look at the legal section of your local newspaper, and you see that they're moving higher. There were 9 foreclosure deeds throughout Plymouth County in September. That is when the lender takes back the property from the owner, usually for non-payment. The same as the 9 in August of 22. It's 13% more than the 8 foreclosure deeds last September, but year-to-date, we're going up. We're up 46%. The biggest change you've seen is in foreclosure notices. A foreclosure notice is the first thing we see at the Registry of Deeds showing someone's in trouble. If you're facing any financial difficulty paying your mortgage, I strongly urge you to reach out to a federal housing counselor. They'll help you for free. You might be able to do some kind of a modification, stretch it out further, extend the loan, other things that they can do to help you out. But there were 48 foreclosure notices recorded in September, more than the 46 recorded in August. 92% higher than the 25 in September of 21, but 155% higher year-to-date. So again, if you're facing difficulty, don't hesitate to act right away. And we're also showing you a list of foreclosures in orders of notice by every one of the 27 communities in Plymouth County. You can see Brockton, Plymouth, and Wareham traditionally are the highest ones in the county. We have a great guest coming on in the next segment of the show, Jim White, who's the Assistant Registrar of Deeds, that's going to talk about some of our new programs, the reopening of our training session, some of the other things that has been happening at the registry, like a transcription project moving forward all the way up to 1863. And we'll have some great opportunities to hear from Tim about that. We've also been promoting throughout Plymouth County, through our senior visits to the Council on Aging's, the ability to offer a free fraud alert. So if you go to our website, PlymouthDeeds.org, go under resources and go to fraud alert. You can put your email in there, and any document that gets recorded against you, you'll get an email. And you can check whether it's something that should have been recorded, like a mortgage that you paid off and the discharge is recorded. And that is a great way to protect your property. You have to be vigilant in protecting your private property. There are a lot of people out there that want to take advantage of your home ownership and that asset. So really take these suggestions seriously. So we will see you in the next segment. Welcome back to the Register's Report. My name is John Buckley. I'm the Register of Deeds of Plymouth County. This segment of the show is always educational in nature. We've had surveyors, appraisers, commercial real estate brokers, a lot of realtors. But every once in a while, we bring on this show a person that can talk about some of our newer things we want to talk about with the activities at the Registry of Deeds. I have a great guest with me today, Tim White, who's the Assistant Registrar of Deeds for Plymouth County. Welcome again, Tim.
Thank you, John. It's great to be here.
And I know we wanted to talk to the public through our Register's Report about a couple things happening at the Registry of Deeds.
Absolutely.
So one of them is really a sign that we've gone through a lot of changes since COVID. Well, we've been back to work for quite some time. This particular aspect we have not restarted, but that is our monthly training session.
Right. Pre-COVID, we implemented a training session for both for the public, and we also do it for municipal employees who often access our records at the registry. That we have an instructor there, our IT person, Christine Richards, does a great job, and kind of walks you through how to search our records at the Registry of Deeds.
Right. Yeah, so the second Thursday of every month, beginning in November, we will be running that program. It is limited in space. There's about 8 seats. So if you're interested, please call in to our office, 508-830-9290, and ask for Lorna Green, and she'll sign you up. And that'll get you a pretty solid 45-minute program of how to efficiently use our on-site search.
Right. And in this day and age, it's become more and more important. I mean, you think about how technology over the years has changed the Registry of Deeds. I mean, we have a wonderful display there that goes back to the quill pen.
Right.
But not only has now technology changed it so that so much more can be done online, remotely, but with the pandemic, that sort of really fueled the need for that type of ability to access our records. We literally shut down our training session for 2 years?
Yes.
About 2 years because of COVID. And now that we're comfortable bringing folks back in, we are going to re-implement it, and we're looking forward to having the folks return to the building.
Yeah, so people should be aware that our online records go back to the beginning of Plymouth County in 1685. So you can go in and search a name through the index link, and the document will come up. It's a great way for people to look at their own property if they want to see whether a discharge has been recorded, whether there's outstanding mortgages. You can look on your own. And for historians and genealogists out there, it's just a wealth of information.
Terrific. Our records, barring none, never mind in Massachusetts, but in the entire country, go back further in history to our country's beginnings. You said, all the way back to 1685, the founding of the county. You can also access the Plymouth Colony records online, going back to the early 1600s.
Yeah.
So it's a fabulous resource, and it's a resource for folks who are in the real estate business, but also, like you said, historians or genealogists and anybody who has that type of an interest.
So we've also brought in a lot of town and city employees over the years because a lot of those individuals use our resources to help them do their job. For example, the assessors department uses sales of property to set full and fair value
Right.
of the properties for their tax billing purposes. And
Yep.
I think it's been a great resource for people to be able to understand how to do
Easy,
that.
efficient way for the town to access the records and establish
Right.
those tax
Yeah.
bases.
And
Yep.
it's kind of amazing how many departments in a municipality actually look at our records. Building departments, planning boards, a lot of people need those reference points
Right.
to do their job.
Board of Health, Conservation,
Sure, exactly.
Zoning Board,
Right,
affordable housing,
right, yes.
all across the board.
Right.
You're right. You'd be surprised at how frequently municipal employees need to access the registry's records.
So if you're out there and you want to sign up, don't hesitate to call Lorna Green at 508-830-9290, and she'll get you signed up and give you a little more information. And it is well worth the hour of your time to come and learn how to do this, no matter what kind of activity you have that's related to real estate.
Absolutely.
Right. So the other thing we want to talk about is a project that we've been talking about for quite some time. Our records are beautiful pieces of artwork almost in the original handwriting days when our staff back in the 1600s and through 1800s actually copied over deeds in their handwriting. And we know that cursive writing is not even being taught anymore in schools. And those beautiful flowery handwritings many times are difficult to read. So we did begin a program a couple of years ago now
Yeah.
that transcribes the information, and you will see the handwritten information, and there'll be a line at the top that says transcribed, and if you hit that like a button almost, the transcribed version, the printed version, will come up to read.
Which is absolutely fascinating
Right.
because it's not just, to their credit, their cursive handwriting is a heck of a lot better than either yours or
Right, for
mine.
sure.
Much more
Sure.
legible. But it's the language that was used back then
Right.
that is almost foreign to us today. You're talking about the 17th century, the 18th century, even the 19th century,
Yeah.
where the language was different, and it's so helpful to have that transcription to go back to when you're researching those records.
So I think it's a great thing for people to look at, try it out. We're moving forward. We're up to 1863.
So
Now-
that's 1685 all the way
Yeah,
up to
right,
1860, almost
1863.
200 years.
And we'll continue to go forward in time.
Yeah.
The other one I want to talk about is the issue of our colonial records. And I know you've been a person that spent a lot of time with the colonial records and have a great love for them and love telling some of the stories.
They are absolutely a wealth of information about how the Pilgrims lived 400 years ago. There are deeds, there's wills, there's judicial court orders, there's the commissioner's records, Indian deeds. It's just amazing the wealth of information that the Pilgrims were able to put on paper, and then not just the Pilgrims to preserve, but for us to preserve, because they've had kind of an interesting history. Originally, these records were being kept by the local governor. Bradford is a good example. And right up until the early 1700s, they were just kept at people's homes.
Right.
And I think the last one was a fellow by the name of Sprague in Marshfield. And then it was turned over to the county when Plymouth County was created in 1685, and the county has had the records since. But even when the county had the records, they were not being kept as carefully as these precious records should be. And it wasn't until 2015 when you and the commissioners put together a project to build a temperature humidity control vault and a reading room for these records. And since that time, they have been taken care of beautifully. And it's just, it would have been such a shame to lose those records. There was a time when the records were deteriorating, as you can imagine. These are 400-year-old documents that were deteriorating almost into nothing. And the Mass Legislature, in its wisdom, hired a company to preserve them by interleaving them into paper and in a protective covering, and then putting them into a book. And we now have 28 books of Plymouth Colony records.
And we've had a lot of historians. I always like it when people come in that are authors and want to see the primary source, and then you later see the book. I think that's a pretty interesting result to see from that kind of research.
TV shows, we've had the fellow from Harvard there,
Yeah, right.
Your Roots, Know Your Roots, or whatever that show is.
Yeah. Right.
They came in and did a story on one of our colonists, Stephen Hopkins, who was an interesting character.
Yeah.
And you can say that he was an interesting character because it's right there in black and white. It's fabulous. I mean, some of these stories are just wonderful.
So one of the records that are coming up in the last segment of the show is the will of William Bradford. William Bradford was the second colonial governor, lived a very interesting life, was governor many, many times of the colony.
Over 30 years.
Over 30 years. And you brought that forward for me to use in my show.
Yep. And the nice thing about the will, it not only tells you what their wishes were, like any will would,
Right.
but they also included the inventories,
Right.
the list of the assets of the decedent. And again, there's another example of how it tells the story. We also had Miles Standish's will, which in his inventory included a sword that is now located at Pilgrim Hall,
Right.
400 years later.
Right.
So that's
Pretty interesting stuff. And
pretty interesting stuff.
And if people are interested, they should call you, and we
Sure.
can work something out to allow them to see it.
Sure.
You want to share your contact information?
508-830-9292. And here's another example, too, is we do, prior to COVID, we were exhibiting one record a month. The last Friday of the month, we were inviting the public into the vault to see these special documents. It might have been Bradford's will, could have been the first deed in our country. It could have been the first law creating a town clerk in our country. I mean, all these firsts are amazing. Now, we stopped with COVID, but I think probably now that we're starting the training session, it might be a good idea for us to reintroduce the in-person viewing. In the meantime, we've obviously made them available remotely.
So we do a monthly newsletter. October is coming to an end,
Yep.
so maybe we can put that in next month's newsletter.
Yeah, maybe
And
I'll put
promote
something in it to promote that will return in
Promote
November.
that record. We have been promoting the colonial records in the newsletter.
We have.
But maybe we can do that, connecting with the opportunity to see the original.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah,
Great. So thank you for coming on the show again.
you bet.
Always good to update the public on what we're doing, and we'll do it again in the future.
Well, thanks for having me, John. It was great to be here.
Great. Welcome back to the Register's Report. I want to thank Tim White for the great job he did in describing some of our ongoing projects at the registry. Although I usually have guests in this segment of the show, it's always nice to update the public on some of the things that we're doing at the registry, from reopening our training place to moving forward with our transcriptions and quite a bit of information about our colonial records that we have on the second floor of the Registry of Deeds in Plymouth. This segment of the show, we always do something lighter in nature. We have some great history in Plymouth County. Certainly the history goes back to Plymouth Colony. Plymouth Colony was founded when the Mayflower arrived in Plymouth Harbor, and they set up a colony. It resulted in a lot of very important documents being created. The colonial court made decisions in the court records, in the wills of the colonial records. They established laws like the right to trial by jury and the right to own private property. Those records tell a great story about the history of America. If you're a genealogist, if you are an individual interested in history, take advantage of Tim's offer to show you that reading room and some of those records. It's fascinating, and we're so lucky to have that all preserved. And again, as he mentioned, they were deteriorating in the 1860s, and the state legislature developed a program to interleave those parchment papers onto paper and bound those books. And thankfully, we've been able to build, with the help of the commissioners, a temperature-controlled, humidity-controlled storage area, as well as a colony reading room. Great stories, part of our history. So, but this segment of the show, we talk about history and some of our records, but we always highlight the holidays for the month. Yom Kippur started on the 4th, National Farmers Day on the 12th, National Dessert Day on the 14th, National Nut Day on the 22nd, and one of the best children's holidays, Halloween, on the 31st. So those are great stories and part of our lives as we go through those with our family. We have a couple notable records we want to bring forward on this show. There was a recent program over at Bridgewater State College when Ken Feinberg was honored at a fundraiser for the Brockton Neighborhood Health Center. Ken Feinberg is an attorney that did a lot of work in mediating the 9/11 fund. If you haven't seen the movie on Netflix, Worth, W-O-R-T-H, it's well worth a watch because it talks about the difficulties of managing a fund and getting people to buy into that. What he did in the management of that fund with the Boston Marathon Fund and other funds like the shootings in Virginia, really showed the skill and talent that he had. And he is originally a resident of Brockton. He and his family lived on Highland Street, not too far from downtown Brockton. Went to Brockton High and basically got into law, and that became his, very much his famous work. A few years ago, then Senator Hillary Clinton came down to Brockton and celebrated him. They named a street leading over to the conference center, Feinberg Way, and he's certainly a very respected person with Brockton roots. The next one you're going to see is Garibaldi. Garibaldi was the person who united the different kingdoms of Italy. Italy was divided into many different areas. North Plymouth was the home to many Italian immigrants. Many worked and joined the social clubs of the area. There is a club over there, the Garibaldi Club, which celebrates Giuseppe Garibaldi. and very active in community affairs. But Giuseppe Garibaldi is still well known throughout the world for his bravery and accomplishments in the unification of Italy. And his likenesses are in statues that appear in Rome, New York City, and squares around the world. So the next notable land record we have is related to the baseball season, which is wrapping up. The Red Sox were out early. The Yankees just got knocked out a couple days before this broadcast, and we're facing another World Series. What I said last month was the Dodgers should be in the World Series. Didn't happen, but we're going to see a great competition this year. But I always like to highlight one of Plymouth County's individuals. There is only one person in the history of professional baseball who has been enshrined at Cooperstown in New York, Baseball's Hall of Fame, and he was from Bridgewater. Mickey Cochran was born in Bridgewater in 1903. Believe it or not, when he was at Boston University, he lettered in 5 sports. No one can do that today. Baseball, football, basketball, hockey, and boxing. He's known as the greatest catcher of his era. He played in an era with very fiery competitors. He was a great and close friend of Ty Cobb. He played for 13 years with the Philadelphia Athletics and the Detroit Tigers, winning 5 pennants, 3 World Series, and 2 American League Most Valuable Player awards. He ended his career, or his career ended, when his skull was fractured by a pitch, but he never batted again. But he was elected to Cooperstown in 1947 to the Baseball Hall of Fame. If you're ever driving down Route 18 in Bridgewater and you go south of the town square, on the right there's a baseball field there, and there's a plaque there in his honor for Mickey Cochran. Worth getting out of the car and taking a look at that. And last but not least in our records is a colonial record. So we have colonial records that include, again, laws, deeds, all the stories that tell the story of the activities of the colonists, so-called pilgrims at the time. But this one that you're going to see in handwriting is a will of the second colonial governor, William Bradford. He was colonial governor elected by his contemporaries 30 times for 30 years. And he, as everyone does, he passed away and he left a will. And the will, if you ever get a chance to see it, and we'll be displaying it at some point down in Plymouth, really tells the story of how people lived at that time. We earlier talked about the will of Miles Standish. This is the William Bradford. But the wills were so detailed in that era. He had a bed with the feathers and 2 pillows, 1 green rug, 2 old coverlets, curtains, 1 great leather chair, a case with 6 knives, a pistol, and a cutlass. And there is a sword, by the way, that you can see of his at Pilgrim Hall. 3 carved chairs, a table, shirts. He left his shirts to his family, dozens of cotton napkins, and pillows, pewter candlesticks, 1 with salt, and a little pewter bottle. It's amazing the detail of the wills and the records of that area. So again, if you ever have a chance to come down and view our Plymouth Colony Records Room, it's on the second floor of the Registry of Deeds in Plymouth at 50 Aubrey Street. Please do so. As Tim White mentioned, we're beginning our training sessions again, second Thursday of every month, and we'll be opening up our old Plymouth Colony Room with one document displayed every month. We'll continue to tell the story about our real estate. Please stay tuned. We'll see you next month. We hope you have a good fall, and we'll see you next month. But I really want to thank Mike Simmons and the folks here at Brockton Cable Access, Lorna Green from my office, and Christine Richards, who helped me put this show together. And again, onward we go. Thank you.